Joining me in the studio now with an interesting report on the rise and fall of Muammar Gaddafi is my colleague Paul Ndiho. Paul, suddenly Gaddafi is an intriguing man.
Yes, he is, Vincent. In February, peaceful protests against the rule of Muammar Gaddafi were met with violence by the regime. 6 months later, Gaddafi is a fugitive, looking increasingly like other ousted autocratic leaders of the Arab Spring. Muammar Gaddafi was born in 1942 in the coastal area of Sirte to nomadic parents. He went to school at Sabaha, then to Benghazi University to study geography, but he dropped out to join the army. Gaddafi debuted on the world stage in September 1969 when he led junior army officers in toppling King Idris in a bloodless military coup. The aging king had ruled the former Italian colony since gaining its independence in 1951. Gaddafi oversaw the rapid development of his poverty-stricken country, formulating his third universal theory, a middle road between communism and capitalism. One of his first tasks was to build up the armed forces, but he also spent billions of dollars of oil income on improving living standards, making him very popular with the poor. Inspired by Arab nationalist sentiments, Gaddafi abandoned ties with Western powers and pursued the aim of uniting Arab countries. He instigated the Arab Federation with Syria and Egypt in April 1971, which soon crumbled in an argument and recrimination. Gaddafi's relations with the West, in particular the United States, became increasingly strained during the early 80s. He denied involvement in bankrolling, hijackers, assassinations, and revolutions while insisting on his right to support national liberation movements. Accusations that Gaddafi sent agents to blow up a Berlin club frequented by United States Marines in 1986 led to U.S. airstrikes on Tripoli and Benghazi. Just days later, Gaddafi's home in Azizia barracks was attacked and his adopted daughter killed. Gaddafi designed a political system of local congress where people were allowed to air their views and appoint representatives to the General People's Congress. In theory, the People's Congress held legislative and executive power, but critics dismissed them as dedicated to maintaining power and wealth in the hands of Gaddafi and his family. Gaddafi poured money into giant projects such as the Great Man-Made River, a vast network of underground pipes that pump water from desert wells to coastal communities. The project, which Gaddafi has described as the eighth wonder of the world, is estimated to have cost $20 billion. United Nations Security Council sanctions imposed in 1992 and strengthened in 1993 crippled Libya's economy, but did not appear to dampen Gaddafi's revolutionary spirit and his anti-capitalist and anti-Western rhetoric. Former South African President Nelson Mandela played a key role in persuading Gaddafi to surrender two Libyan nationals suspected of involvement in the December 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland, that killed 270 people. Libya subsequently agreed to accept civil responsibility for both Lockerbie bombing and the bombing of the French UTA airliner over Niger in 1989, and pay compensation to relatives of the victims. Gaddafi caught the world by surprise in December 2003 when Tripoli announced it would abandon its weapons of mass destruction programs and agreed to short notice checks of its nuclear sites by the UN nuclear inspectors. The announcement drew swift praise from London and Washington and virtually ending Libya's international isolation. British Prime Minister Tony Blair visited Gaddafi in Tripoli in March 2004, and over the next 2 years, the United States ended a broad trade embargo, removed Libya from the list of state sponsors of terrorism, and resumed full diplomatic relations.
Great report there, Paul. And that's not all. Paul will be right back to discuss part 2 of the rise and fall of Muammar Gaddafi. Welcome back to In Focus. My colleague Paul Ndiho joins us again for more on the legacy of Muammar Gaddafi.
Thanks, Vincent. After sanctions were lifted against Libya in 2004, Muammar Gaddafi enjoyed renewed life on the international stage, visiting world leaders in Europe, addressing the United Nations in New York. In April 2009, Gaddafi's fourth eldest son, Mutassim, made an official visit to the U.S. State Department as Libya's national security advisor and was met by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. In 2009, Gaddafi was elected by the African heads of state as the new chairman of the African Union, replacing Tanzanian President Jakaya Kikwete. In June 2009, Gaddafi made his first trip to Italy, Libya's former colonial lure, wearing a picture of hanged resistance hero Omar al-Maktoum pinned on his military uniform. Gaddafi was welcomed by Italian Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi and given a red carpet reception. He returned to Italy the following month to attend a G8 summit in his role as the African Union chairman, and there he also met U.S. President Barack Obama. The return to Libya of convicted Lockerbie bomber Abdul Baset al-Megrahi, who was released from jail in Scotland for health reasons in August 2009, was welcomed with celebrations. Gaddafi's second eldest son, Saif al-Islam, accompanied al-Megrahi back to Libya, and state television showed coverage of the Libyan leader greeting the former intelligence agent later that evening. In September 2009, Gaddafi marked the 40th anniversary of his leadership with 6 days of festivities, designed to show that the long-isolated oil exporter was again open for international business. After years of heavy sanctions, Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez was guest of honor at the military parade held to kick off the celebrations. Later that month, in his first visit to the U.S. since taking power, Gaddafi addressed the United Nations General Assembly in New York. In his speech, Gaddafi accused major powers on the UN Security Council of betraying the principles of the UN Charter and condemned the veto power held by the 5 permanent members on the Council. The advent of the Arab Spring, which saw autocratic rulers topple in neighboring Tunisia and Egypt in early 2011, encouraged a popular revolt against Gaddafi's 4 decades in power. Gaddafi's violent crackdown on dissent sparked a civil war, prompting the Arab League to call for a United Nations no-fly zone over Libya. On March 17th, the UN Security Council voted to authorize a no-fly zone and all necessary measures to protect civilians against Gaddafi's forces. 2 days later, a 5-country coalition made up of the United States, France, Britain, Canada, and Italy launched airstrikes on Libya in a joint operation called Odyssey Dawn. On June 27, 2011, the International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Gaddafi, his son Saif al-Islam, and the head of Libyan intelligence, Abdullah al-Sunasi, for atrocities committed during a violent uprising that began in mid-February. In spite of the rebellion, NATO airstrikes, and the defection of some of his closest aides, Muammar Gaddafi has remained defiant and appears to be hunkering down for a long siege. He has not been seen in public since a barrage of airstrikes hit his compound in Tripoli on May 1st, killing his youngest son, Saif al-Arab, and 3 grandchildren.
Well, Paul, thanks a lot for that very informative report on Muammar Gaddafi. But really, going back to some of the stuff that you've highlighted,
Right.
Looking from outside over those years, he looked like a guy who had it together, like somebody who did a lot for his country, brought development, plowed oil money back into the economy. What went wrong? Why do we see everything just crumbling down on him?
I think you're absolutely right when you say that, but a couple of things went wrong. First of all, the one area where he missed a great opportunity maybe to transform that country, he he failed to put institutions in place, institutions that could guide that country long after he's gone. He was the law, he was the police, he was the everything. So Libyans, right now, actually Libya is going to get more chaotic because they have nothing to build on.
Some have also said that he kind of tended to own the country. Over time, the country became like his personal property, and that kind of didn't go down well with other people, or most people in the country.
One great philosopher once said that absolute power corrupts absolutely. So Gaddafi became victim of that. He was corrupt, and power corrupted him to the extent that he felt like Libya belonged to him. The people of Libya were his people. Yeah. So even when you look at how his sons are dealing with things, they think that they own Libya, or Libyans bow to them.
Yeah, and I wish we had more time, but he's a very interesting guy, even across the continent. This is a guy who he funded rebellions, he funded rebel groups, and he funded the governments within those governments, those countries, and therefore kind of he made as many friends as enemies. Thanks a lot, Paul, for giving us those wonderful, wonderful two reports on the rise and fall of Muammar Gaddafi.
Thanks for having me, Vince.